So welcome to Just Wanna Quilt. We are a research podcast out of Tulane University Law School about quilting. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor and I just want to quilt. This is our 5th season. We are so excited. We talk to all kinds of people about quilting and crafts and art and sewing and entrepreneurship and of course copyright and trademarks and all kinds of other things, the intersection between the two of those things. And I'm super happy to have our guest today, which is Barney of the Sewing Doc Academy. Andi has been on our show a bunch of times, and we even have a lost episode from 2021 that we haven't played yet. And we're going to talk to her about her business and about life during COVID for someone who was fixing sewing machines. Andi's awesome. I can't wait for you to hear her stuff. Oh, and by the way, the sound is just a little bit odd because it had been a while since we had done some recording, so the microphone had been moved for the first few minutes, and then it gets put in place and it's all good. So if you get a little frustrated with that, it'll get better very, very quickly. Anyway, we're back. This is our first official guest of the season, and we're so very excited. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Hi. Oh my goodness. All right. So it is February 1st. Oh my gosh, it's February 1st, 2023.
How do we get
for our first interview of the season for our 6th season of Just One Quilt. And as in every season, we start out strong and then we kind of end up not doing so good. And then we start again strong and then we kind of just get bored and stop. So this will air on Monday, which is our birthday.
Awesome.
So what I thought we'd do is 2 things. I thought we would chat about sort of where you are and what's new and all of that. And then talk a little bit about intellectual property, and then we'll turn it off and we will record. We're working on Just Want a Trademark for Makers, our book, which is pre-order, which scares the crap out of us at Amazon at this point, but it's not due out until September. And so we'll chat more about that. Does that sound like a good plan?
That sounds great. That sounds great.
Awesome. All right. So Andi, where are you? Tell us what your background is right now.
I'm actually in our ambulance, which is our only functioning work space anymore. I think the last time we really talked on the podcast was still at Red Hen, which was 2018, I think.
That's craziness.
I know.
All the time. That's so bizarre.
I know. We have
in 2018, when I met you, you had a shop called the Red Hen. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
And it was like the coolest shop I'd ever been in ever. And I then later was like, just pick stuff out and send it to me. Like
we did.
And like what you do is so amazing that it was just like, okay, we have to just do it this way, So
that meant the world to me. That was one of the most fun projects, and the fact that you trusted me so much with that.
Gosh,
incredible.
100%. Seriously. So 2018. So let's go back. Let's go back to 2018. Yeah. And tell us a little bit, for those that haven't heard your first episode, let's talk a little bit about who you are and why you're so awesome. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm surrounded by awesome people as part of it. So I am Andi Barney, and I'm mostly known now for sewing machine service and repair. Back when Elizabeth and I first met, I was also co-owner of our quilt shop, which came about because of machine service. I'd been playing in that field for a long time, self-taught, and was restoring machines more than anything. And just at the time I was contemplating finding a public space for my business, an old friend resurfaced and said, I have health issues and I just bought a quilt shop and I can't do this by myself. 7 weeks into buying her quilt shop, her health declined, and a lot of it had to do with the formaldehyde in the fabric and some triggered some autoimmune disease issues. So I came in as co-owner, and our arrangement was, in exchange from me managing and running the shop, I basically brought my machine service into the shop. So it gave me a chance to kind of get my feet under me and understand what the space would be like as far as having a public business. So I think we started that in 2015. So for 4 years, we did have our quilt shop, for almost 5 years. But then it got to the point where machine service we were so in demand that I just couldn't do both anymore.
Let me ask you before you tell us a little bit about the economics. Like, was the machine shop just more profitable or more fun? Or like, tell us like the interaction of that.
That's a good question, actually. It was, for me, it was definitely where my personal passion was. I loved owning a quilt shop, but it was very clear to all of us that as much as I loved it, it was not, as far as managing it and doing the day to day, was definitely not my calling. Like that's not what lights me up. Nobody likes the treacherous, dealing with the bottom line and the profit margin. That was more of my partner's job. But I could tell that many years in, I loved being with customers and I loved helping them with fabric. I really hated all of the other parts. And I think that's important to know because we're not going to love every aspect of what we do.
What do you think, like, help me understand what the other parts were?
Organizing staff, and we had, you'd been in our shop. Our shop was extremely large square footage wise. It was, I think it was 12,000 square feet.
It was big.
It was cheap. The previous owner had been there for 20 years. So our rent was cheap. It was an interesting space. We made it work. But trying to fill that much space and make it not look empty. And it was like constant logistics. And then it got to the point where profit margins on fabric, if you talk to any quilt store, now it's pretty much apparent. Back then, people really didn't believe that we were making no money. My partner and I never once took a salary from the shop. We were living it heart and soul. And it was mainly because for me, I did have a benefit. I had free rent space. But if we had taken a salary, we would never have lasted.
That's crazy.
And that's just the nature.
Well, and it always feels like for quilt shops, just the amount of inventory you have to have. And then if it sits, it gets stale, like the pressure. I mean, in contrast to the business you have now, which is people bring you they bring you stuff, you fix it, it goes away. Right? Exactly. Like that, it's very different model of all of this inventory, which is just so heavy and huge. And I don't know. I feel like it's a lot.
And you could never, you had to just try and look into a crystal ball and try to predict what was going to be the thing that would actually sell. And I think that's one reason lines have gotten to be the way they are. If you look at Moda, especially all of their designers, what we liked about Moda and similar is that if you had, if you had, one of their designers and then 6 months or a year down the road, you still had pieces left over from that collection, they would almost integrate into the newer version. So you kind of learn to recycle things, but I found it for myself to be very stressful. I felt like I was carrying this weight of, I have to be responsible for our financial future. And I just felt like I was not doing, I feel like
you have to keep buying. I mean, that's the part is that things might not sell, but that doesn't mean you don't have the obligation to buy because people want the name. And it also feels like, is it true? It feels like it's sort of sped up. The amount of things coming out is crazy. So right.
It's crazy. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's like, we're talking like a 4-month cycle now where about every 4 to 6 months, you have a new line by a designer coming out. Right. You barely have gotten the other one, even wrapped up or it blows my mind.
It's funny because we're really a very big Tula Pink house. We like Tula Pink. We're really into it. We can't keep up.
No, I can't. And I can't. And I'm like, I have my coveted collections and I keep adding gradually. I have to really wait till one speaks to me because, I already have a stash, but I'm afraid I'll never see it again. So
it's very weird. Like that to me seems like there's not enough time to breathe to be like, it's gone. Or if you see it in we're really into the Alice line that Tula did. So now that we see it, other places are like, oh, that's old. Right? That's what's that about? We don't treat them like books. We treat them like newspapers.
I know.
And that's bizarre that we have that culture of oh, that's last year. That was 2 months
Yeah, there's
ago.
An expiration date now.
This is really crazy, right?
That does make me sad. I do think at some point something's going to have to shift, especially with the economy too. So I always wonder about how trends are going to go like that. And that's something we tried to keep up on. I mean, we went to Quilt Market. We always had a rule for ourselves that we did not purchase fabric at Quilt Market because it's such an emotional decision. I mean, if you think about it from a consumer standpoint and they invite you into some special event where you get catered to and of course you're willing to buy, it's the same.
Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. We came home with a ridiculous embroidery machine one time because we just purchased it was let's get it. You're like if you this. I really like embroidery.
I know. And the designer's right there in front of you and you have this conversation and you connect and it's we go home with everything. So we made a rule for ourselves. You don't buy fabric at Quilt Market because that is the biggest hangover is when you get home and you start getting bills and you're like, what did I do?
Right. Exactly. You're like, okay, this seemed really cool in the moment.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the shop. So the shop, you were like, done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Which is sad because I just have to like, maybe I should just like tell you, go to a shop and buy me stuff. And then like, that's the way we have to do it.
I would be happy to do that because I haven't had time
buyer.
I don't have time to do quilt projects for myself. So
It's
I would
hysterical.
totally go shop for everyone else.
People are always like, that's my favorite part. It's like my least favorite. It's so stressful picking out fabric. It's just bizarre. Sid, my kid, loves that. But without her, I'm always like, well, white, black.
But she's good at it too.
It's just silly. Anyway, okay. So 2018. So you start in 2015. You end the shop in
2019. Early 2019, and it was kind of just a and it, that's a stressful time too, because everybody wants to believe that quilt shops are magical, and they are. It was the hardest decision I think I've ever had to make, to finally say,
because people love you.
And I love them. I mean, we were surrounded by, I mean, it's not customers, that's family, that's friends. And I'm very big on, all of us have had a negative quilt shop experience where you go in and you don't feel welcome. I mean, we had seating just so people could sit and rest.
Hang out. It was such a beautiful, it was magical. It was magical. What I don't understand is like, why are these shops doing that? Like,
I don't know.
Why are shops mean? I don't understand it.
I don't either. And I don't think that we can blame generational gap anymore. For a while, there was this generational gap, but
not all of them are. I don't want to be like, I don't want the shops boycotting the show or anything. No. But we've all been in there where it's like, the thing that was so interesting is having the kids. So, I traveled a lot with Sid and their best friend, Sky. And they always had, they're Gen Z, purple haired, non-binary kids that are just, lovely. But you knew the shop by how they responded to them. And Sid is my only, and I'm incredibly indulgent parent. So if anything, I don't buy much for myself, but if she wanted $400 in fabric, we bought it, and they treated her so crappy. And it was like, you don't know who your customer is,
Well, we learned two big rules that we had in our shop, other than obviously be naturally kind. We only hired people, and we went through staff. We went through people where we did not tolerate, and we had to let them go. And the shop before us didn't have the same warm feeling we did. In fact, one funny side story is I had an experience in Red Hen before I was an owner. 5 years before, I was in there for a customer who had bought a long arm, and we had to borrow their long arm for a week while she was waiting for her. So I was in the shop quilting, and we were treated so poorly, and I had green hair at the time.
Yeah.
I was treated so poorly. I gave them a 1-star review because I left crying. I was there for 6 days that week, and I cried every day when I left because they were so
Isn't that terrible? I just don't get it. I really just don't,
Like, a year into owning the quilt shop, it occurred to me I should go back and change my own review on the quilt shop that I now own.
I like that.
So we did have a few rules that were beyond what you should just be courteous and be very kind to people. But we learned that you don't ever assume, if a husband and a wife come in, you never assume that the wife is the quilter. And you never assume that if it looks like a mother and a daughter, you never assume that only one of them is a quilter. Because that's two
you just
things.
Don't know.
No, with younger people, we hear that all the time. If they'll talk to my mom, but they won't talk to me.
Right.
And that's very dismissive. And I'm
one shop, I won't say where, followed them around thinking they were going to shoplift.
I've gotten that with green hair. I know it's crazy, but it's
what are you guys doing?
Where are my foot bags?
Now I have the 2 kids, and they're following them, and now I'm following them. It was just the ridiculous thing. Like, I'm like, I don't trust you with my kids.
I wouldn't either. No, I wouldn't either. And it really irritates me, and it has nothing to do with my having green hair. I will always champion young people, for one thing.
Yeah.
Right, I know it's not
and we all want them in the shops. That's the part that's so funny, right? Yes. We're all like, where's the next generation of quilters so the industry can continue? Anyway, okay. So we've gotten off track. So close the shop, and then you just go home and hang out and you're relaxed and you don't do anything else, right?
Oh, I wish. No, I'm not a very good kept wife. So
no, you're like insane. That's why the level of activity in your life is kind of overwhelming.
Language in that. Yes, we so we did close mainly because sewing machine repair had just really taken over. And our biggest hurdle was that as we grew, there was no one to hire. So I cajoled Paul into leaving his very cushy job in 2016, had nice steady salary, good benefits. And I was like, come join me over here on the unemployed, self-employed side. And so because I had no help, and there was no one, there's no school, there was nothing. So we started teaching our skills in our shop just to see if like maybe there's other people that want to learn. They just don't have the avenue. And we were correct in that gut instinct. So we had started building our academy 2017, I think is when we started testing. So by the time 2019 came around, we did close the quilt shop so we could focus